On New Year's Day, 1931, Wallace Wade had everything. His Alabama team had just conquered the Rose Bowl, cementing their third national title in 6 years. He was the undisputed king of college football, the man who forced the nation to respect the South. But this celebration was a charade. The victory parade was for a ghost. Wallace Wade had already walked away from it all. Months earlier, he'd stunned the sports world by announcing he was leaving the empire he built for a small school with no football tradition. Why would a man at the absolute peak of his power give it all up? To understand the answer, you first have to understand the man. This is the story of the man who put Southern football on the map. And it's a story that begins with a profound mystery. Why would a man at the absolute pinnacle of his power, having achieved everything, voluntarily walk away from it all? William Wallace Wade was born on June 15, 1892, on a farm in Trenton, Tennessee. Wade learned football at Peabody High School before attending Chicago's Morgan Park Academy, a military preparatory school that would shape his lifelong dedication to discipline and order. In 1913, Wade made a decision that would distinguish him from every other Southern coach of his era. He traveled north to attend Brown University. At Brown, he was teammates with Fritz Pollard, who would later become the first black head coach in the National Football League. Wade's time at Brown culminated in a trip to the 1916 Rose Bowl, making him the first man in history to participate in the Rose Bowl as both a player and a head coach. When World War I erupted, Wade's education was interrupted by a higher calling. He served in the United States Army, rising to the rank of cavalry captain. This period of military command was no mere interlude. The barracks and training grounds forged the core of his character. The military gave him a profound sense of order and discipline. It taught him to focus on a mission. And those traits would become the hallmark of his entire coaching career. After the war, Wade returned to Tennessee and took his first head coaching job at the Fitzgerald and Clark Military School. His success was immediate and overwhelming. In 2 years, his teams posted a 15-2 record, winning a state championship in 1920. At the military academy, he coached 2 future consensus All-Americans, demonstrating an early eye for talent that would serve him throughout the rest of his career. His performance caught the attention of Vanderbilt coach Dan McGugin, who hired Wade as an assistant in 1921. Wade's impact was profound. During his 2 seasons in Nashville, the Commodores compiled a perfect 15-0-2 record and won 2 Southern Conference co-championships. In 1923, the University of Alabama offered Wade their head coaching position. What they got was an iron disciplinarian who immediately transformed the culture of Alabama football. Wade's players called him the Bear. Decades before that nickname would become famous with another Alabama coach. Wade's teams employed the single wing formation, an offense based on deception, power, and versatility. But his strategic genius extended beyond X's and O's into psychological warfare. In a signature tactic, Wade would often start his second-string players against formidable opponents, wearing down the opposing first-teamers while demoralizing them before unleashing his starters. His players respected him completely, despite his demanding nature. As one former player recalled, Wade once left practice for a phone call and forgot to dismiss the team. The players and assistant coaches continued practicing in the dark for hours, not daring to stop until one of them finally called him at home to gain permission to end practice. The culmination of Wade's early success came in 1925. His Alabama team stormed through the regular season with a perfect 9-0 record, outscoring opponents 277-7. This dominance earned Alabama an invitation to the 1926 Rose Bowl, the first ever extended to a team from the South. The game against heavily favored Washington was more than just football. At a time when Southern teams were viewed as inferior and second rate, Alabama's presence in Pasadena was a statement of regional pride. In a dramatic contest, the underdog Crimson Tide roared back from a halftime deficit to win 20-19, scoring all 20 points in a furious third quarter rally. With the victory, Wallace Wade had put Alabama and the entire South on the national football map. Duke offered a significant salary, but Wade's departure stemmed from fundamental disagreements with Alabama's hands-on president, Dr. George Denny, who truly controlled the football program. In the book Wallace Wade, Championship Years at Alabama and Duke, author Lewis Bowling points to two main reasons as to why Wade left: control and cash. Wade wanted total control of his program, and Duke, flush with tobacco money, offered him an unprecedented salary, estimated to come to at least $100,000 over 5 years. But Wade's final season at Alabama was his masterpiece. Knowing he was leaving, he coached them to a perfect season, an act of supreme professional integrity. At Duke, Wade immediately set about building another powerhouse. His greatest achievement came in 1938 with a team that became known as the Iron Dukes. This squad accomplished one of the rarest feats in football history. They completed the regular season undefeated, untied, and unscored upon. The Iron Dukes' perfect defensive record was the ultimate expression of Wade's coaching philosophy. They employed a 6-2-2-1 defensive alignment that completely stifled opposing offenses week after week. The season, however, ended in heartbreaking fashion. In the 1939 Rose Bowl, USC scored a touchdown pass in the final minute to spoil the Iron Dukes' perfect record with a 7-3 victory. Wade got what he wanted: total control and a massive paycheck. He went to Duke and built another legend, the Iron Dukes, but just as he reached a new peak, his life would be interrupted by a challenge that had nothing to do with football, and it would change him forever. When World War II erupted, Wallace Wade faced a choice that defined his character. At 49, an age when most men are settling into comfort, Wallace Wade chose duty over dynasty. He had done it again at Duke. He had built another powerhouse. He was king in his new castle. So what did he do? He traded it all in for a foxhole. The Army tried to keep the famed coach out of combat duty, including ordering him to coach an all-Army football team in a series of exhibition games against NFL teams. But in the end, Wade got what he wanted. In April 1944, he deployed overseas and commanded the 272nd Field Artillery Battalion, from Bowling's book. In April 1944, Lieutenant Colonel Wade took his 272nd Field Artillery Battalion overseas. His unit was composed of 240 millimeter howitzers, the heaviest field artillery in the U.S. arsenal. The 272nd served at various times with the 3rd, 1st, and 9th Armies. Under Wade, it participated in the Battle of Normandy, the Siegfried Line Battle, the Battle of the Bulge, the crossing of the Rhine, and the 9th Army drive through Germany. At the end of the war, it was one of the units closest to Berlin. Wade went through the entire European campaign without a day's leave, despite being 52 years old. He was in range of enemy fire constantly for 9 months, dodging enemy minefields and spending time in foxholes. Wade served with distinction, advancing to the rank of lieutenant colonel. He returned to Duke to coach football in 1946 after the war was over, retiring in 1950. By his own admission and by the measure of the scoreboard, the old fire was not quite there. His post-war teams did not replicate the stunning success of his pre-war squads. Wade himself offered a simple explanation: "I'm no longer tough enough." Sports writer Jack Horner in the Herald Sun of May 3rd, 1959 said, Wade went off to war for the second time after producing his fifth Rose Bowl team in 1941. He was in the middle of some of the heaviest fighting in Germany. He saw 140-pound American youth die for their country as gloriously as the 200-pound athletic type. I never really had the zip I had before, he admitted to us Saturday. The war had taken something out of one of the most successful coaches in football history. He had softened and mellowed. After all the fine young men he lost on the battlefield, he just couldn't be as demanding of his boys on the gridiron. His record showed it. In 8 years at Alabama, from 1923 through 1930, his teams won 61 games, lost 13, tied 16, and appeared in 3 Rose Bowls. His first 11 seasons at Duke, from 1931 through 1941, his Blue Devils swept 78, lost 16, tied 3, and hosted one of 2 Rose Bowl contests. Upon his return from World War II, Wade coached from 1946 through 1950, and in those 5 years, Duke won 25 games, lost 17, and tied 4. He never reached again the former heights he enjoyed. It's incredible to think how service and sacrifice on that scale could change a person. You think that kind of experience would make it hard to go back to just coaching a game? Wade's impact extended far beyond wins and losses. From Bowling's book, a player named E.P. Bethune relates how Wade was as good as his word. I agreed and was about to leave his office when I remembered a recent newspaper article condemning some colleges for offering scholarships to football players. But after the first semester, if they didn't make one of the first 3 teams, they would kick them out. I turned and asked Coach Wade if we needed to sign a contract or an agreement. He stood up and looked me square in the eyes as he stretched his hand out across the desk and said, as he looked at his hand, Bethune, this is our contract, and it is good as gold. Never in all the years I knew him did I ever hear of anyone who doubted Coach Wade's word. He was one of the most honest and straightforward persons I have ever known, and I owe him so much. Wade had promised Bethune 4 years of college, and when the war interrupted his education, Wade ensured his scholarship would be waiting when he returned. The Bowling book's last chapter is full of comments from former players and associates. Howard Riz stated, "Who else was strong enough to take Duke to the Rose Bowl and bring the Rose Bowl to Duke?" Clem Griska said, "Coach Wade had a real bearing and carried himself with authority. Even Coach Bryant was a little intimidated around Coach Wade, whom he had great respect for." And last, this comment, because it's hilarious. One day, Tom Rogers failed to emerge from a pileup. He lay groaning on the ground. Wade asked, "What's the matter, Rogers?" "I believe my right leg is broken, Coach," Rogers said. "Well, you've got another one, haven't you?" said Wade. Wade believed deeply that football built character, but only through winning, not losing. He maintained that discipline, preparation, and unwavering standards were the foundations of success both on the field and in life. His coaching tree included numerous successful disciples who carried his principles to other programs. From 1951 to 1960, Wade was the commissioner of the Southern Conference. He was inducted into the College Football Hall of Fame in 1955. In 1967, Duke's football stadium was renamed Wallace Wade Stadium in his honor. Wallace Wade passed away on October 6, 1986, at the age of 94. His legacy is that of a foundation builder who established the tradition of excellence at Alabama, created a dynasty at Duke, and served his country with distinction in 2 world wars. More than just a football coach, Wade was a man whose life embodied the values of duty, discipline, and unwavering integrity. His story reminds us that true greatness is measured not just by championships won, but by the character built and the lives transformed along the way. If you enjoyed this story, you might like our playlist featuring other great coaches in college football history, or check out our playlist of early American college football history, How Football Began, if you want to learn more about how football evolved from a mob at the beginning to the modern game. I'm John Johnston. This is Hardcore College Football History, where I make videos to recover a past that's been forgotten. Thank you for watching.